This is Scandinavia. Well, not exactly because we don't have Finland and Iceland yet. This will be the Scandinavian peninsula plus a couple of other islands in this general area. Now there are people living here, the Sami, the Laplanders and a few others. But the people who are going to dominate this region and make it famous across Europe are the Nordics or Norse people. And their story begins so like most national stories, with a big mysterious beginning that no one knows much about. During this time period, there are a bunch of different tribes from the Nords to the Danes to the Swedes to the Norwegians and so on. We're gonna use the word Vikings though because that's what they called themselves and that's what everyone else was calling them too. So it doesn't matter if we call them Vikings, Norsemen, Norse people. Let's just call them Vikings, okay? Vikings. They lived in these little communities usually near a fjord and spent their time raiding, pillaging and trading. Now the thing to note about this whole northern European region is that it is empty. There's hardly anyone here. In fact, this is one of the least populated regions in Europe and probably the least populated region that has this much power over the rest of Europe. The geography of the region is such that these Vikings can operate out of here and be far away from any real competition. The only people they really ever had to worry about were the Anglo-Saxons in England and the Franks and the Holy Roman Empire to their east. But back to our Vikings, they begin expanding outwards in the 8th century. They start taking trips to the British Isles, to France, to the Byzantine Empire and even to the Mediterranean Sea. The reason they do this is because they want stuff and they're willing to kill anyone to get it. But they also don't want to spend their time killing each other, so they develop a system of trade. So when the Viking goes to France, he might raid a village and take some stuff back to Scandinavia to sell. And then someone else from Scandinavia might go buy that stuff from him and take it somewhere else. So they have a system of trade that develops pretty early on. In addition to raiding, the Vikings also began settling down and establishing their own territory outside of Scandinavia. This was mostly around the British Isles, in areas like Ireland and Iceland. They also settled in France along the River Seine, where they created a Danish settlement that became known as Paris. Over time, the Vikings transitioned from being raiders and pillagers to becoming merchants and traders. And in fact, one of the biggest reasons for the end of the Viking Age is that they started converting to Christianity, which obviously didn't approve of pillaging and murdering. As the Viking Age comes to an end, Christianity becomes the dominant religion in Scandinavia, and the political landscape begins to change. In the 8th century, Denmark was the first kingdom to unite all of the Danish tribes under kings like Ragnar Lodbrok and his son Harald Bluetooth. Bluetooth's legacy, still remembered today, because he basically kick-started the modern nation of Denmark. His statue is in the old town of Copenhagen and they named a famous tech company after him. But Harald Bluetooth wasn't the first king of the Danes. He had predecessors like Horik I and his successors would include Sweyn Forkbeard and Canute the Great. These guys were all Danish kings in the 900s. While Denmark was uniting under kings, Norway was doing the same thing. Norway was a collection of tribes along the western coast of the Scandinavian peninsula. And at its head was a guy named Harald Fairhair. He beat up a bunch of other Norwegian lords and united the country under his rule in the late 9th century. Norway would become a very powerful kingdom in the following centuries, thanks to its powerful navy. Sweden took a bit longer to unite. It wasn't until the mid-10th century that the first Swedish king appeared, named Erik the Victorious. But like Denmark and Norway, it was a slow process and it would take another 200 years for the whole country to be Christianized. Olaf Skate-Konung was the first Swedish king to convert to Christianity and he ruled over a Sweden that had already been partially taken over by Danish forces. Skate-Konung had to deal with rival Danish kings, while also trying to expand Sweden's power and establish its dominance over the Baltic region. The conversion of Scandinavia to Christianity is a slow process that takes place between the 10th and 11th centuries. As the kingdoms become Christian, they align themselves with the wider European political order and begin building stronger ties with other kingdoms. Olaf Tryggvason was a Norwegian king who tried to force Christianity on his people, but he ended up dying in battle against a pagan uprising. His successor, Olaf Kyrre, continued to promote Christianity and by the 11th century, it had replaced Norse paganism. Similar things happened in Sweden and Denmark. Eventually, by the 11th century, most of Scandinavia had converted to Christianity. With the political and religious changes taking place in Scandinavia, the 11th century saw the beginning of the High Middle Ages. As Christianity spread throughout Scandinavia, so did the influence of the Catholic Church. Monasteries and cathedrals were built, and education began to become more widespread. Feudalism developed in Scandinavia, creating a hierarchy of nobles and peasants. The year 1397 marks a turning point in Scandinavian history with the formation of the Kalmar Union. Queen Margaret I of Denmark, Norway and Sweden unites the three kingdoms under her rule in what was intended to be a dynastic union, meaning that the kingdoms would keep their individual identities while sharing a monarch. The union was seen as a way to strengthen Scandinavian unity and protect against external threats, particularly from the powerful Hanseatic League, a group of German merchants based in the Baltic Sea. However, the union proved to be unstable due to the rivalry among the Scandinavian kingdoms. Sweden's desire for independence led to open conflict and eventually the collapse of the Union in 1523. As the Kalmar Union collapsed, the three kingdoms began to assert their independence and pursue their own interests. Denmark-Norway remained a powerful force in Northern Europe, engaging in conflicts with the rising power of Sweden. In the early 1600s, Sweden emerged as a major player on the European stage under the leadership of King Gustavus Adolphus. During the 30 Years' War, Gustavus's military victories against the Holy Roman Empire established Sweden as a prominent Protestant power. This shift in power led to a series of wars between Sweden and Denmark-Norway, resulting in the loss of territory and influence for Denmark-Norway. Norway remained in a personal union with Denmark until 1814, when it was ceded to Sweden after the Napoleonic Wars. Meanwhile, Iceland, Finland and the Faroe Islands came under the control of foreign powers. Iceland was initially part of the Kingdom of Norway until it was transferred to the Danish monarchy. Finland became a province of the Russian Empire, and the Faroe Islands were incorporated into the Danish kingdom. By the 19th century, the political landscape of Northern Europe had changed dramatically. The Napoleonic Wars had a profound impact on the region, leading to significant territorial shifts and the end of the Danish-Norwegian Union. During the war, Sweden formed an alliance with Britain and Russia against Napoleon, resulting in the Treaty of Kiel in 1814, which stipulated that Denmark should cede Norway to Sweden. This decision aimed to strengthen the Scandinavian alliance and prevent future conflicts with Russia. The transfer of Norway to Sweden marked the end of Denmark's dominance in the region and the beginning of a new era in Scandinavian politics. At the same time, the concept of romantic nationalism began to emerge in Europe, inspiring movements for independence and self-determination among various groups. In Scandinavia, rising nationalism fueled calls for reform and independence from foreign rulers. For instance, the Finnish national awakening in the early 19th century led to demands for greater autonomy within the Russian Empire. Similarly, Icelanders began advocating for greater control over their own affairs, aiming to end their dependence on Danish rule. In the 20th century, the political landscape of Scandinavia underwent significant transformations as the region grappled with the legacies of colonialism, industrialization, and two world wars. The First World War saw the continuation of the trend of neutrality among Scandinavian countries. Sweden maintained its non-aligned status, pursuing a policy of armed neutrality, while Finland and Denmark remained connected to their respective alliances, with Finland aligned with the Central Powers and Denmark with the Triple Entente. The interwar period witnessed growing tensions in Europe, leading to the outbreak of the Second World War. During the conflict, Sweden continued its neutrality, although it had close economic ties with Germany. Denmark and Norway, however, experienced occupations by Nazi Germany. Norway's strategic location made it a target for German forces seeking to control the sea routes to the Soviet Union. After the war, all three kingdoms modernized into constitutional monarchies with strong democratic traditions. Today, Scandinavia is known for its high living standards, robust welfare systems, and commitment to peace diplomacy. The region continues to play a significant role on the global stage, advocating for environmental protection, human rights, and sustainable development.